Agnes Harding's screams ricocheted through the nave for 3 days after the last stone was set, and the congregation still sang hymns as if nothing was wrong. You can almost hear the mortar setting, while every pious head pretended the echo was wind. If you think medieval piety was all incense and quiet devotion, wait, it gets so much uglier. They didn't burn Agnes, they entombed her alive in the south wall of St. Swithin's because fire was considered too quick for a woman who knew 60 healing plants. The clergy called it preventive sanctification, a phrase that sounds holier than murder. Parishioners filed past the makeshift scaffold, offering awkward blessings the way you might pat a coffin at a wake. Someone even sold sweetmeats in the churchyard, because nothing compliments a live burial like honeyed figs. Her so-called witchcraft was a practical handbook for surviving the 1349 plague year. Feverfew teas, onion poultices, a sage and salt gargle that actually helped sore throats. But Agnes's real sin was being correct, while male physicians were still balancing humors and bleeding patients white. After her neighbors recovered quicker than the rector's own nephew, the word heretic carried a convenient echo of competition. Of course, they went straight for the wall. You can't argue with someone who's literally been sealed off. The legal pretext came from an episcopal court that listed maleficium by herbs, hymns, and unlicensed prayer. Translation: she knew Latin plant names and refused to charge the poor. Evidence: a basket of dried foxglove, 2 beeswax candles, and a tongue-in-cheek love charm found under the Reeves' daughter's mattress. Naturally, the charm became Exhibit A, because the best way to hide infidelity is to brick up the woman who predicted it. On sentencing day, the villagers gathered like it was a morality play. Only the devil didn't show, and the heroine got no lines. Agnes trudged barefoot over cold flagstones, shackles ringing off key with the processional hymn. The masons worked fast. Wages were higher when the prisoner still had breath. A priest read Psalm 51 while the first row of stones climbed above her knees. She asked, quietly, whether Christ enjoyed masonry so much on Golgotha. The priest pretended not to hear, but his hands shook hard enough to rattle the chalice. They left her a fist-sized aperture for confession and torturously small communion wafers. The whole faced the altar because proximity to grace was supposed to cleanse the evil out. In reality, it served as a grim megaphone. Every gasp, every prayer, every claw against the sandstone underscored Sunday Mass. Children were warned that listening too closely let demons slip into your ear. Adults listened anyway, because horror is more compelling than any sermon. Anchorites in other parishes chose enclosure voluntarily, building reputations for holiness behind thick walls. Agnes was granted the same architecture without the luxury of consent. The irony? Donations spiked. Pilgrims traveled miles to hear the penitent witch murmuring in the dark, dropping coins in an offering box conveniently nailed beside her tiny window. Faith and commerce make an uncomfortably neat duet. For 8 days, villagers claimed to hear her chanting a healing litany, the very prayer that supposedly damned her. By day 9, the chanting ceased, replaced by a steady, wet scratching. Someone suggested it was mice. Someone else said, souls don't squeak. Nobody removed a brick to find out. Fast forward to 1867, when restorers chipping away Victorian plaster discovered a child-sized cavity. And, yes, you read that correctly, human nails embedded in the inner face of the stones. The skeleton inside was kneeling, skull tilted toward the altar, jaw dislocated in a final yawn of air that never came. Conservators cataloged 37 herbal seeds tangled in the shroud's remains, proof she clutched her apothecary pouch to the end. The report called it folk healing paraphernalia, because apparently, even in the 19th century, we were still allergic to the word medicine. Osteoarchaeologists later noted the wrist bones showed microfractures from repetitive grinding, likely pestle work, while her ribs bore the telltale lesions of plague survival. That's right, the woman was immune to the very disease that wiped out half the town. Imagine curing your neighbors only to be mortared behind the miracle you performed. Church ledgers written in crabbed Latin attempted to justify the act as salus populi, the welfare of the people. Yet a marginal note, probably by a guilt-ridden deacon, simply said, et tamen curantur. And yet they were healed. Dark humor, medieval edition. One surviving letter from a traveling friar complained that the parish relied too heavily on the spectacle in the wall to drive donations, comparing it to relic fraud in Rome. He was told to mind his vows and enjoy the alms, because of course monetizing misery was holier than swallowing pride and admitting Agnes had been right all along. Even the Reformation, which upended just about everything, left Agnes where she was. Protestants stripped saints from their niches, but saw no need to liberate a so-called witch. Superstition is surprisingly ecumenical when it fits the architecture. By the Enlightenment, locals had recast the story as cautionary folklore, misbehave, and the wall awaits. Schoolboys dared each other to run a finger across the mortar line said to contain her last breath. Couples carved initials there, proof love conquers all except common sense and medieval masonry. When antibiotics finally arrived, someone joked that Agnes would have called them lazy physician's powder. A modern historian calculated that if her remedies had been replicated, 1,000 plague deaths could have been avoided in that region alone. But statistics make poor epitaphs. Stone makes a better one. Today, a discreet glass panel covers the cavity so tourists can peer at the void while reading a sanitized plaque about local healing traditions. The plaque never mentions screaming. It never mentions the 37 seeds cataloged and then misplaced in an academic archive. It certainly never admits the congregation kept singing while the mortar dried. Stand there long enough and you'll notice the draft. The wall breathes, courtesy of a hairline crack running the height of the nave. Engineers attribute it to settling foundations. Parish lore insists it's Agnes, still sighing over every sermon that ignores her. Either way, the chill is real, and it defies centuries of patchwork. We like to believe progress builds straight lines, but sometimes it just swaps stones for screens. Medieval villagers pretended not to hear a dying woman while scrolling through spiritual absolution with their rosaries. We flick past medical misinformation with the same shrug. Different wall, same willful deafness. So next time you swallow a pill without knowing who invented it, whisper a thanks to the woman who crushed herbs until her wrists cracked, taught a village how to live, and was rewarded with a tomb she could touch from every side. The wall still stands. The lesson might one day finally sink in.